The United States just pulled off one of the scariest government overthrows ever. The reason it's so scary is that the very citizens of the country overthrew the government without knowing that it was an orchestrated and calculated plan from an outside force. Now, as someone that follows global geopolitics, this almost slipped under my radar, which makes the whole situation even more crazy. In this video, I'm going to outline exactly what happened and why this is a stark warning for the global south and the continent of Africa. This is the kind of video you want to watch if you do not want to be manipulated by outside forces and if you want to support the message of sovereignty and unity. Thank you so much for choosing to watch this video today. If you don't know me, my name is TJ. I'm Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. This week, the Nepalese government collapsed in a storm of protests that killed over 20 people and forced a prime minister to flee the country. But the truth about this story will shock you. It was a warning shot fired at every country in the global south, considering closer ties to China and the BRICS nations. And the most terrifying part, the young people who brought down the government genuinely believed they struck a blow for freedom and justice.
Today I stand here with the dream of building a new Nepal, with a fire of hope and passion burning within me. But my heart is heavy because this dream seems to be slipping away. Nepal, our mother, this country gave us birth, nurtured us. But what did it ask in return? Just our honesty, our hard work, our contribution. But what are we doing? We are bounded by the chains of unemployment, fleeing abroad in search of opportunities. We are trapped by the selfish games of political parties. Corruption has woven a web that is extinguishing the light of our futures.
It's important for me to explain what happened so you understand, because this playbook is likely being prepared for the continent of Africa as well. In 2023, strategists in Washington spotted a dangerous trend. Nepal, which is geographically positioned between India and China, was starting to look eastward instead of westward. The country had begun to realize that China's independent internet system wasn't the authoritarian restriction that Western media portrayed. It was actually a massive economic advantage that allowed Chinese digital platforms to dominate global markets. TikTok had crushed its American rivals so completely that Instagram and YouTube were desperately copying its features. AliExpress was outselling Amazon. Shein had become the world's biggest fashion retailer. Temu was conquering e-commerce globally. Meanwhile, European countries that had allowed American tech giants to colonize their digital space were watching their wealth flow to Silicon Valley. Nepal looked at this success and made a rational calculation. Why follow Europe's path to digital colonization when they could follow China's path to digital independence? Pakistan and Cambodia were reaching the same conclusion. All three countries realized that digital sovereignty could be the foundation of real economic development. This trend troubled Washington because it was not happening in isolation. These countries weren't just considering digital independence, they were gravitating towards China's broader development model and away from Western-dominated institutions. Nepal had been growing closer to China economically and was poised to benefit from the Belt and Road connectivity projects. The real fear wasn't about internet freedom, it was about losing control over nations that were supposed to remain within the Western sphere of influence. These countries in strategic locations like Nepal started aligning with China and building independent systems. This could trigger a cascade of defections from American hegemony. So the National Endowment for Democracy went to work. This is a group similar to the CIA, and throughout 2024, they spent $1.6 million in Nepal, enormous money in that country, on programs focused on promoting youth civil engagement, combating corruption, and countering China's authoritarian influence. They organized discussions, trained reporters, and specifically targeted Gen Z youth for political activism. The genius of this operation was psychological. They took real grievances, and Nepal had plenty, with crushing youth unemployment, economic hardship, and genuine corruption problems. And they channeled that anger towards a single target: the government's attempt at digital sovereignty. When Nepal finally took modest steps towards internet independence by asking social media platforms to register locally, American companies like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube refused to comply. Chinese-owned TikTok and other platforms happily registered. The stage was perfectly set. The government was then forced to ban the non-compliant platforms, and the explosion was immediate. Thousands of young people poured into the streets, genuinely believing they were fighting for digital freedom against an authoritarian government. They carried signs reading "Urban Social Media" and "The Youth Against Corruption." They felt righteous, empowered, and morally superior. As traditional platforms were blocked, protesters downloaded Jack Dorsey's BitChat, with downloads reaching almost 50,000 in a single day. The irony was perfect. International media coverage, a revolution of internet freedom being organized through an app that works without the internet and without centralized control. It reinforced the narrative that was about technological liberation rather than geopolitical control. The young protesters had no idea they were participating in a carefully orchestrated regime change operation. To them, they were heroes fighting corruption and authoritarianism. They felt the satisfaction of a moral victory as government buildings burnt and the prime minister fled the country. They believed they had spontaneously organized this. They believed they had spontaneously organized this movement through their own righteous anger. This, a very insidious form of modern warfare, making people feel victorious while they unwittingly served foreign interests. Like the movie Inception, the idea was planted so skillfully that the targets believed that they had created it themselves. The youth felt empowered and righteous whilst being completely manipulated. What happened in Nepal follows a pattern documented extensively in the Lindsay O'Rourke's book, Covert Regime Change, which details 64 successful regime change operations executed by the United States since World War II. Despite America's rhetoric about promoting freedom and democracy, the historical record shows a consistent willingness to overthrow governments that don't align with US interests, regardless of their legitimacy or popular support. The message set out to other countries is crystal clear. If you try and align with China, if you attempt digital sovereignty, if you move away from Western control, we will do all we can to turn your youth against you, and they will thank us for it. This brings us to Africa, because there are a lot of similarities between Nepal's actions and the direction that many African countries are pushing towards right now. Multiple African countries are joining BRICS nations. Egypt, Ethiopia are full members already, with Nigeria and Uganda as partners, with many others expressing interest. This represents the largest shift towards the China and Russia sphere of influence since the Cold War. Simultaneously, Africa has launched the Continental Internet Exchange, creating digital infrastructure that keeps African data in Africa rather than routing it through Western-controlled servers. While this isn't quite the same as China's Great Firewall, it represents a similar assertion of digital sovereignty that reduces dependence on American tech giants and may very well lead to the same type of sovereign digital opportunity for the continent. From Washington's perspective, this could be viewed as a similar or even more serious separation from Western influence. A continent with 1.4 billion people and vast natural resources is aligning with BRICS while building an independent digital infrastructure. If this succeeds, it could trigger the end of the American technological hegemony globally. The vulnerabilities are obvious and terrifying. Africa is the youngest continent on Earth, with over 60% of its population under 25. This generation has grown up on social media, making them incredibly susceptible to digital influence operations. Real grievances exist everywhere: corruption, inequality, unemployment, poor governance, the perfect conditions for the same plan that happened in Nepal to happen on the continent. America's military also openly discusses what they call information operations, specifically designed to be framed as a righteous strategy to counter the Chinese communist agenda in key areas across Africa and the rest of the global south. You might say the playbook is already being deployed. We have to watch for increased funding to African civil society organizations that are focused on democracy promotion and transparency. Notice how legitimate criticism of corruption gets weaponized to oppose continental unity and BRICS alignment. Pay attention to how youth movements against real problems get redirected towards targets that serve Western interests. The psychological manipulation could be the same. Young Africans could be made to feel that opposing their government's BRICS alignment makes them champions of freedom and justice. Continental integration could be framed as authoritarianism. Digital sovereignty could be presented as isolation and oppression. The most dangerous part is that these young people might genuinely believe they are fighting for righteous causes. They might feel more morally superior and unknowingly serve foreign interests. They would also experience that rush of a moral victory while being completely controlled by an external force. Africa's leaders face difficult choices: ignore legitimate grievances and risk being overthrown by manipulated youth movements, or address the grievances but risk having the solutions undermined by the same forces that create the problems. The youth will be convinced that any government moving towards BRICS and a digital sovereignty is corrupt and authoritarian by definition. This is another reason why continental unity is so crucial. Individual countries are vulnerable to the Nepal treatment, but the continent moving together is much harder to destabilize. The continental internet exchange and BRICS expansion must be defined collectively, not just by individual governments. Most importantly, African youth must understand that their genuine desire for justice and progress can be weaponized against their own continent's interests. Real problems require real solutions, but these solutions cannot come through movements that serve foreign agendas while claiming to serve justice. There is some hope, however, based on some of the things we have witnessed in the past few years, particularly the fact many smear campaigns from France and the United States targeting Ibrahim Traoré. The African population did not buy it, but actively pushed back against it. This shows that the West's grip on digital manipulation does not always work as smoothly as what happened in Nepal. The Nepal situation shows us the battle for Africa's future will be fought in the minds of youth, African youth, who genuinely want a better world. The question is whether they will recognize when their righteous anger is being channeled towards targets that serve someone else's empire, or whether they will feel victorious while unknowingly destroying their own continent's path to genuine independence. Africa's choice towards BRICS and digital sovereignty represents hope for real development and independence. But Nepal's warning is clear. That choice will be defended not just against external enemies, but internal movements that feel righteous while serving foreign masters. I would love to know what you guys think about this. I was quite troubled when I was doing the research for this, so please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. However, if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write the word digital sovereignty now in the comments section? It just lets me know that you watched the video to the end, you like the channel, you like what I'm doing, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.